Hello. Thank you. Yes, the microphone wasn't on the first time, I know. It's super nice of you to all be here. We're so many people even, because this is the second to last session of the day, so you're probably like gonna rush to that last one and then to the unofficial official party. Anybody at Mojo? Yeah? 2 people. Woo! You're all tired, which is why I appreciate you being here. Somebody came in and was like, "Are we drinking in this session?" I said, "No, you're not." Because, yeah, way ahead of you. Who knows this phrase, ride drunk, edit sober? 1, 2 people, 3 people? Okay. It's a very common phrase among writers. I'm not a writer, I stole this, but ride drunk, edit sober basically means just put pen to paper. Write what you want to write. Don't stop yourself. Don't limit yourself. Don't just keep writing. And then the next day, maybe look at it and think, what did I do? Was this good? Yet, why I'm giving this session is when I open LinkedIn, or when I open Substack, or when I even open Outlook, it seems like everybody's absolutely wasted all the time writing me stuff. But I think they're not actually writing stuff. I think what we're really seeing is the huge glob of AI slop being generated by various LLMs, and people have gotten very comfortable making that do their writing for them. Does anybody agree with me? Yeah, okay, because if not, this is going to be a long hour for you. So no, this is the 3rd time I'm giving this presentation, and you're getting the extended cut, because NDC has 60-minute slots. So that means I'm going to have 15 minutes more than usual to rant. And it's going to be a little ranty, because I am a little pissed off with the state of the world right now. Because if I look at those messages on LinkedIn and everything looks exactly the same, it kind of pains my heart. Because we used to have things like social media managers, writers, journalists, and they're still out there, but something's going on. So I want in this session to look at what is going on and how can we maybe remedy this, and why do we keep going towards that LLM direction so easily? The solution, by the way, spoiler alert, is you, people in IT, software developers especially. Like, you can really remedy this slop. But let's first start with some examples for those of you who are not up to date with the latest and greatest of LinkedIn. I want to show you a pattern, and normally that would mean showing you 1,000 examples, but we're not going to do that. So I sort of condensed it into 2. Feast your eyes on this. The top left is one I had created with an LLM. The bottom right one is actually from a company. Normally I say, I'm not going to mention their name. It's actually my company. And I'm not happy with how they're writing their messages. So here we go. See if they like this. Anything that stands out. Raise your hand, just shout, anything. Yeah. Emojis. Yes, absolutely. The bane of LinkedIn's existence right now. Anything else? M-dashes, yes, absolutely. Heard another voice? Bold text, yes, absolutely. Anything else? No? That's okay. I've got way more for you. But yes, emojis was the first call. So emojis are weird. Well, emojis aren't weird, but emojis are weird if you think about how LLMs are trained, because they're trained mostly on books, publications, academic papers, and the entire internet. But when you think about it, we don't really use emojis that much on forums, not if you look at the complete corpus of data. So what I think is going on here is that after that pre-training where the LLM learns language, well, it doesn't learn anything, but when the LLM starts to be able to speak language, something happens afterwards. Something happens where the developers of these models must be thinking, okay, in our post-training, let's teach it something new. Let's teach it to converse with humans. And I look at this like aliens looking at humans and going like, how do we talk to these hairless apes? I know, we'll add these little hieroglyphs that they so much love to WhatsApp to each other. That's the only reason I think this made it in, because there's no good reason for an LLM to be throwing this many emojis at us. Like, there's nothing in LinkedIn pre-2023 that said use as many emojis as possible, yet that's what we're seeing. Most used emoji by ChatGPT, by the way, is the check mark. This is extra interesting for me because this is like the best emoji for the sycophantic behavior that LLMs have, right? LLMs, you give them an idea and they say, wow, well done. You're so smart. Yes, good point. Even if you're completely wrong, it'll say, oh, wow, well done. And this emoji is just that. It encompasses that whole sycophantic behavior. So I love it, but it makes me kind of sad as well. Then the M-dash. Who knows what an M-dash is before I spend a lot of time? So about half. So, right, you get hyphens in different sizes. There's 3 here. There's way more. There's like non-breaking space variants of it. There's full width, normal width. But these are the 3 most common ones you'll find in text. The top one is the one that you have on your keyboard. It's a hyphen. You've used hyphens before. The second one is an N dash with an N. You actually used that a long time before LLMs came in. Because if you're using a Microsoft Office product, when you do space, hyphen, space, it turns it into an N dash. You may not have noticed, but I can tell in some of the data that I will show you later that that is exactly what's been happening. The M dash is used by professional writers, which most of us are not. And I am also not. But in most of the abstracts of this conference, in most of the LinkedIn posts, in most of the emails I'm getting now, I find that M dash. And it's become a sign of you use an LLM. And there's nothing wrong with using an LLM, just making sure we're on the same page, or this is my belief at least. But does it have to be so obvious? The M dash is actually quite nice because it's often used instead of parentheses, which I use a lot. But it's also, there was one description that I found particularly beautiful. It said, you use an M dash when a comma would be too soft or a full stop would be too hard. I'm like, I should use that more. But I'm not going to because then everybody thinks I'm using LLMs to write everything. But I thought maybe these M dashes are just something I'm seeing. Maybe it's just confirmation bias, right? Don't think of a pink elephant. Everybody's thinking of the pink elephant. So I thought, do I have data that I can prove this with? So what I did is I didn't write, an LLM wrote a little script that pulled 4 years of email from my mailbox. This is what popped out. The bluish, I'm colorblind, so I'm going to name it by how I see it. The bluish line is the N dash, proving that we've been using this for quite a while. So this is per year, how often that N dash happened to be in my inbox. The orange line is the M dash. And that one you see very clearly at 2023, suddenly, hello, there it is. To the point where there was a point in last year, December 2025, where 15% of the emails that people sent to me contained an M dash. So that's not just newsletters from people, right? That's also my company, my colleagues writing their stuff to me with LLMs, and then it lands up in my inbox here. So I'm not happy with that. But it's a point of contention if we should keep using it. I'm fine if you use it. The bold text, somebody mentioned this. This one is weird to me as well. Because if you look at what an LLM can do, it can take 3 words and make it into 3 paragraphs. So what it does actually, we'll talk about this a little bit more, is it sort of diffuses your intent. It makes it bigger without really adding much more content. And then it goes back and emphasizes stuff with bold text. Like, it blows my mind. Like, why not just keep it short so you don't have to add all that bold text everywhere? This is something that you see a lot, especially on social media posts, bold text everywhere where it's not really needed. Actually, for me, if you send me an email with bold text, I'm going to consider that rude. Right? And I don't know what it's like here, but for me, that would be really, really weird. But the weirdest thing, perhaps, for me, or the thing that annoys me the most, is that these LLMs seem to be very USA-focused, very culture-coded for America. And I especially find that it is way too positive. Every message is a celebration of something. Every message sounds like a commercial, like you're trying to sell me something. Like, you could write a eulogy and it would still go, wow, this amazing thing happened. And that's just, if it would be a Dutch LLM, I'm Dutch, it would be a very critical LLM. It would also disagree with you all the time. But this is just that celebration that every message must somehow have a silver lining. I don't like it. And all of these things together, and there's way more, sort of feel like this was a joke 2 years ago or a year ago, and now it's not. And I'm worried. But before we start fixing stuff, it's probably good to talk about how we got here, because I think it's lazy to say we have LLMs and therefore this happens, right? We're better than that. It's not just because the technology exists that we stopped caring about how we send messages to each other. I actually think there are 3 reasons. First of all of this stuff is happening super fast. We're sort of part of the problem, actually, because I remember 3 years ago, LLMs via the Azure OpenAI API was pretty new, and I was talking at a conference about different levels of applications when you start putting GenAI in there. So the first level, very simple, the user provides text, your application throws that at the LLM, text comes back, you show that to your user. So if your application is a document summarizer or has that as a feature, this is what you would do. Then, of course, the next step, a term that's been thrown at you a bunch of times over the last few years, retrieval augmented generation. So the user sends you text again, for instance, a question. We first send that to a search engine, whether that's in your company or outside. That returns documents. We then take the documents in the question, throw that to the LLM, show the user the result. And then, even back then, we were already talking about autonomous agents. If I had longer fingers, I would make bigger double quotes. There's nothing autonomous about them, right? They're just trying to figure out stuff to do without really thinking. But we're talking about this at this conference, right? We've had a bunch of agent talks, but your colleagues who are not in IT, knowledge workers, office workers who are not in IT, they're here. Because this year or last year, they got their ChatGPT paid for by the company. This year, they finally got their M365 Copilot, and they're staring at an empty screen. Okay, let's make a tweet. I don't know, let's figure it out. So they're here where we are way ahead. And we kind of need to help them to claw them back a little bit. Also, there is just a psychological fact that we are not good at reviewing machine content. Did anybody see my presentation September last year? Good, okay, I'll cover that very shortly, then if you like it, there's an hour you can watch on YouTube, it's great. But we are just not equipped to do this. You turn 3 words into 3 paragraphs, your brain says, well, looks good. Because somehow you recognize something that you put in there. So that's a weird one. But the one that I'm very sure about is that a lot of people are doing this, posting this on LinkedIn, sending emails like this, making documents this way, because we were told it was possible. If you were at Richard Campbell's keynote yesterday, he made a point, and I'll paraphrase because I was also hacking away at these slides a little bit, but I'll paraphrase him. He said, the people who are investing in AI, they don't really understand the technology, which opens the door to the tech bros to say, oh, here's some stories about how this is going to replace everybody. You should invest in this. The same thing, I think, happens here. Every AI booster, every tech bro keeps saying, this will replace writers, this will replace journalists, this will replace software developers. So we're doing it. We're just following along. And that's a little bit annoying because these same companies, they stole the data from software developers, writers, journalists to make a tool to replace them. So it kind of doubly hurts. I told you it was going to be ranty. But, silver lining then, I'm almost an LLM myself, I do think we can remedy this. I do think there is something to be done about this, and I believe that because I've been building some stuff to prove that to myself. So I'm not really great at writing, so I do want to use an LLM, but I want to make sure I do it in the correct way. The thing that I ended up building was a tool that creates session abstracts. For those of you who don't know what that is, today you looked at the agenda, you smashed your finger on my head, and up popped in the agenda the session abstract, the text that told you what you were going to hear when you sit down here. So that's a session abstract. I'm bad at making those. They're very short form, high information density. So I thought, I'll just use ChatGPT. This was like 3 years ago when I was so naive to try that. A lot of people did, but I got caught. I got caught with something that can only be described as the world's worst tech abstract. It was 3 paragraphs. I will only make you suffer through the first. I'll read it for you before you start reading it yourself. It starts like this. In an era, it's already terrible. In an era where technology and mindfulness intersect, the power of AI is reshaping how we approach app development. This session delves into the fascinating world of utilizing artificial intelligence to expedite and streamline the development process of a mobile meditation app. Yes, one of 3 paragraphs, and it makes no sense. Like, the information density is so low, you probably don't know what the talk would be about. And I got called out for it. I thought, yeah, because half a year later when I was called out for this, I did not recognize this text. It was mine, but I did not recognize it. And it's these words especially that trigger me now, and I can spot them with the naked eye in other people's texts as well. So things like, in an era, makes the whole thing sound like a movie trailer. Why? But if you look at agendas of many conferences, you will find things like this, in a world, in an era, and you can already hear that trailer voice coming in. But things like reshaping, fascinating world, expedite and streamline, that's not how I talk. That's not words I would use. And especially the word delve. has a special relationship with tech abstracts, because in 2023, like 30% of our abstracts had the word delve in it, because this is just how GPT looks at tech abstracts. So for me, it stands out so much. It's an absolute sore. So I decided to build something around this. I also think tech abstracts are the perfect sort of tryout for this, because it is short, again, very high density, but it's also something that we have decades of experience with. We've been doing this for a long time, these conferences. That also means there are a lot of experts available. A lot of them walking through the conference hall these last 2 days, right? So there is something here that I could use to my advantage to make something where, one, I wouldn't have to write everything myself, but two, it wouldn't look like what I just showed you, because I don't want to do that again. So where do you start when you try to then make a tool that writes this stuff? So the last 2 times that I gave this talk, I said, you got to start with the content. And I believed it back then, and it was good. It's still, I changed nothing in the code, but I changed how I believed how we should be dealing with LLMs. And it was actually in the airplane over here that I was reading a newsletter from Cory Doctorow. Anybody, that name rings a bell to people? One, yeah, but you've agreed with everything I said so far. So I can't try, you're an LLM, basically. Give me the check mark. The book Enshittification, anybody? Oh, that's a must-read. Okay, some hands are going up. He has a daily newsletter, and he, in his newsletter, wrote about art and what makes art art, which I think is a difficult question to answer. But he made a point that said, art is about intent. It's about, if I make an image with AI of a sunset, I could type that to AI, and it will make an image, and I give it intent, but the generator doesn't care. It's just going to make something that statistically looks like the thing I asked for. But if a photographer, or if I make a picture of a sunset, my intention is to enjoy this later, or to show it to you, to evoke some kind of emotion, to send some kind of signal. And I think that is where we should start when we try to battle AI Slop. It's not about content, it's also about content, but it's about intent. So it's about asking the question, what do I want you to learn? Who should even be here, right? It's in the abstract because that's something I care about deeply. I want to make sure you don't come in here and think, oh, this has nothing to do with what is in the abstract. It is also about the tone of voice that is included there. There's a lot of intent to be sent to that model that you have to think about. It's much like if you try to make a presentation, don't open PowerPoint. Like, first write it down. What are you going to say before you go into slide hell? Just intent first. And that allows you to do the drunk writing. So you figure out what it is that you really want to talk about, and then you can use an LLM to do some of that. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. But before I show you the bit of the tool that does that, it also really changed how I look at LLMs. So 3 years ago, calling those APIs, using ChatGPT, I thought, I can type 3 words and make it into 3 paragraphs. That is magic, right? Part of me still thinks that I can throw any kind of text at these models and something human-like comes back. That's exciting. Like, it's an exciting moment, even if the technology has some questionable backgrounds. It's very exciting. But it's changed my view a little bit now, where I'm thinking about this not as an exciting, magical model, but more as an intent diffuser. So I give it 3 words, my intent. It will make 3 paragraphs. So now it's all scattered. What I wanted to say is scattered over that text. And I'll put in one quote from Doctorow that made me laugh out loud in an airplane, and that doesn't really happen that much. He said, 3 sentences divided by 1 million pixels yields an image that has an average intentionality that's so low, it's practically homeopathic. And I chuckled in an airplane. That never happens. So, but it feels that way when you send somebody an email with a 10-word prompt and somebody gets a page of an email. You might as well send me the prompt so I know what you were trying to say, right? So it's about intent. So how can we be super intentional about something like tech abstracts? The answer is very simple. You ask an expert. And I asked Arthur Dohler this once before. Anybody seen a session of his at any point in your life? No? One person. Did it make your life better? There you go. Amazing, no, serious, not a joke. He's an amazing speaker. I'm going to click away his head before this is the picture that he's taking. But he is really good in his sessions, but also really good in writing these abstracts. So I asked him, like, hey, what is it that you do that makes it this good? So that's actually something that I ended up building a tool around. So this is Mondrian Muse. you can steal this. Please just credit me, but you can absolutely steal this. It is built in a GitHub repository, which you don't have to do. It's just, it had all the tools that I needed to make this happen. So basically what this is everything revolves around issues, and I have a lot. You might recognize some, like this one. This is the talk that you're looking at right now. So if I have an idea for a new talk, I go to new issue, and I say, let's create an abstract. And I have to answer a couple of questions. And the 4 questions that I got from Arthur Dohler. So what do you think, who do you think this talk is for? So is this for managers, software engineers, or anybody with an interest in AI, or people who hate LLMs? What do you think you will learn from this talk? Or what do I think you will learn from this talk? And you don't have to write this pretty. You could write drunk in these fields. It's absolutely fine, but you have to know the answer, because that's the intent. Right, then what do I think you'll be able to accomplish when you walk out of this door? And a 2-sentence summary of the talk. If you can manage that, you probably have enough of that intent to make a good abstract. If not, cancel button is right there. So this is the one you're currently looking at. What happens is this issue gets posted, and then magic happens, and a PR appears. But there's no such thing as magic. So what actually happens, it's just the YAML doesn't matter too much. It's just a GitHub workflow that starts running that does a couple of actions that I've programmed it to do. The first thing is it runs a prompt. And this was back in the day when I still used a tool called Prompty. If you've never heard of Prompty, you will never again, because the last update was 11 months ago. It was a great idea, but it's absolutely not being picked up anymore. But it allows you to add some nice metadata to a prompt to an LLM. Also tells you what model to use, what temperature. Temperature is basically the measure of how random the model will be. It's between 0 and 1, and I put it to 0.8 because the LLM can write drunk with me. This is fine. It also makes demos fail every once in a while. It has some sample data, but then it has the actual prompt. And the prompt, there's not that much in there. Like, the more instructions, the more I tell it what not to do, the more it gets confused and sometimes does it anyway. So I completely split that also for this application. The LLM and I are writing drunk, and then we'll come back later with some other tools to do the editing sober. And one thing I did is I added a lot of examples of abstracts I wrote painstakingly, hands on keyboard in the past, answered those questions that I wasn't using before, and that's how it sort of knows how to make an abstract. So what happens is in the pull request, we go there. Dun, 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 dun. You can see one file changed. And this is basically the abstract that you see in the calendar today. But how can it be if we still have to edit stuff? So back to the slides before we get there. So I said back to the slides, give me control. There we are. So with the writing drunk part out of the way, it's time to actually do some work to make sure that we get something good at the end, right? We now have, the abstract that I showed you there was the finished thing. The original is kind of bad. It contains words that I don't want. It contains all kinds of fluff that is unnecessary, and I want to make sure to get that away, to get that out of my abstract. So it's time to do some reviewing, or the editing sober part. But what do you look for? Like, we just had a few things like emojis, bold text, M-dashes. You can easily pick those up. But there's a lot of things that make you feel this is AI slop without realizing what that is, without having the words for it. And a lot of that has to do with authenticity. And it's interesting because I can see a LinkedIn post from somebody I've never met and still feel like it's inauthentic because it triggers those AI sloppy rules in my head. Something there needs to be named, needs to come out of the dark. What makes it unauthentic? It is actually Dylan Beatty who made a really interesting video about that. Anybody seen this? No? You should watch this. 15 minutes, but I'll give you a bit of a summary of that. He has 13,000 abstracts. I don't know where he got them. He probably won't answer me if I tell him, like, hey, where'd you get them? Or give them to me. But he has those, and he's been doing some basic data engineering on that to see, over time, how words and abstracts changed. So I'm not going to play the video here, but I'll have some screenshots. Here he still looks pretty relaxed. And you see words here, if I can zoom this in, like Xamarin, Window is actually Windows, ASP.NET, Studio, REST, Blazor, Document, Streamline, Java, stuff that you would expect in an abstract, right? You see that, for instance, Java here picks up at a certain point, but he explains that that's because the conferences he got this from started inviting Java speakers. So it's a normal thing for that to increase. Then the next, he starts becoming a little bit more agitated, because now we see efficiency, equip, empower, and navigate. Nothing of that has anything to do with technology per se. It's not like Xamarin became popular and then died. Like you will expect that to happen in that graph somewhere. And then here he gets really ticked off, because then we get enhance, delve, and insight. Delve. Look at this. This graph makes no sense, except that it coincides with the release of ChatGPT and large language models as we know them today. I thought that was a super interesting video to see, so I replicated parts of that in the tool that I was building, but I definitely recommend you to watch this video, because he goes into how you can do this as well, how you can build this at home. But you might not have 13,000 samples of anything, right? That's annoying. Maybe you do. Maybe for work you actually do have some of that data, like I have my email inbox. I didn't expect that to be useful email, but it helped for some data engineering. But you can do this based on the work of others as well. So one of the things that I ran into was this website. Anybody know this website? It's called tropes.fyi. This is made by somebody, Osama, I forget his last name, but you can look it up. He actually put words to the stuff that we feel when we see this AI slop. Like, he actually made an entire directory of the stuff that I at least hate so much. So if you go through that directory, there's stuff here like negative parallelism. This is a super common thing in LLMs. Or this I hate with a vengeance. So somebody must have prompted, tell the people about this design flaw. And the LLM goes, I know how to turn that into a full sentence. It's not a bug, it's not a feature, it's a fundamental design flaw. If you read this and then open LinkedIn later, not now, later, you'll see a bunch of this. Also, a bunch of marketing messages and newsletters have this as sort of the basis. Also, LLMs love doing things in threes. You'll learn that if you go through this directory as well. Like, it loves making lists so much that sometimes it drops the lists formatting and just puts it in different paragraphs and still keeps it in threes. Everything just happens in threes. And that must be something we humans do as well, but not every time. Same with those M dashes, right? We use them, but not every time. And LLMs are just great at doing that. So, yeah, it makes me angry every time I open this website, but it's been very useful, so not that angry. But looking again then at the two examples that I showed before, there's actually one of them in here. And this one I find weird, but LLMs do this a lot. So, and it's especially about the trend from lifestyle changes to the emotional connection. This is what we call a false range. What is a true range is 1 to 10. It's A to Z, right? It has a meaningful middle. You can say something about this range. There is no such range as lifestyle changes to emotional connection. Like, what is the middle there? But LLMs will use this to just tie things together and expand on the text that you've given it. So this is something that once you've read through those tropes directories, you'll go, oh no, it's everywhere. But the good thing is that then you can start solving things. But especially that not X, not Y, but Z. Oh, do yourself a favor, open LinkedIn later. It's going to be amazing. If I find you all crying by the exit, I know why. So, right, we're half an hour in. We can all send you home because now you know. You can see AI slop with your naked eyes. Bare eyes? I don't know. But this is not the end, because we are so terrible at reviewing machine content, right? So there's a problem. Once you start making this, once you turn 3 words into a paragraph, or even all that intent turns into an abstract, you suffer from a thing by this name, automation bias. Anybody ever heard of that? One person? And it wasn't from me. Who's been talking to you about that? Is it like anyone? Oh, cool. Yeah, well, that's a great place to get your info. No, seriously, automation bias is one of those biases that we've suffered from the start of us having automation. but it's becoming really apparent now with generative AI. So automation bias, for those who don't know, is overly relying on machine-generated decisions or proposals. So a machine tells you what to do or shows you something and you go, yes. The worst example of that I could find was this. Driver claims GPS navigation sent him in a lake. So he obeyed. And this happened in America. I don't want to say of course. But all of the issues were in America, except for one. It was in Hawaii, but it was an American tourist, so that counts. But you will find a lot of cases where people have just followed their GPS systems right into the water, sometimes at night, which is sort of understandable, sometimes in clear daylight. The top right one, she claimed, well, the GPS said I should go here. I saw there was water. That's a no-go. But I saw a car all the way in the distance. That was a car on a dry dock. She drove straight into the harbor, straight into the water, because GPS told her so. This is the core of automation bias, just very eagerly accepting the machine, because machines are rational, and therefore they must be correct. They are not. You can also weaponize that, by the way, which is what Google likes to do. So Google, you know Google, because it used to be a really good search engine. They reached a point where they couldn't grow their searches anymore the way they wanted to. And if they can't grow their searches, they don't get the revenue. So they did a very unpopular thing not too long ago, and that's they made their searches worse. That way you search more often, and they can show you more ads. And it's exactly those ads that I would say is weaponized automation bias, because they make those look very much like real results. And then they got slapped on the wrist for that, so then they found other ways to do the same. The product section, when you're looking for flowers, it'll give you, oh, you can buy flowers here from companies that paid us to show you this. It is sort of weaponized automation bias, trying to trick you into, here's the truth. Click me, for the few cents that they get from it. So I'm not too happy with that, but luckily, it also works the other way around, and they make a fool of themselves a little bit, because when LLMs became a real thing, Google was a bit behind. Even though their scientists made the transformer algorithm, they were not the first to really scale that up. So they were way behind it. Eventually, they saw Bing doing stuff, and they thought, let's put search overview in our search. And it was hilarious. So you search for something, and Google would try to explain what it found. And you get stuff like this. And luckily, you're all laughing, so you know that this is probably not something you should do, and I'm pretty sure that most people will have understood that this was an error, but you can see how that could quickly go wrong. In other examples, this is not a terrible one, but a taro is a root used in South Asian cuisine a lot. How long should you boil that? 15 to 20 minutes, an hour and a half, or until it's tender. It basically doesn't say, I don't know, because it keeps trying to tell you, I got this, I got this. Gets worse if you wondered about this ever. And these are the kind of examples that you're like, nobody's going to do that. But this is the most famous one. I'll zoom in. Don't worry. Don't strain your eyes. Yeah. Have you seen me do this presentation before? Okay, whatever. Somebody apparently had the problem that their cheese kept sliding off their pizza. So they Googled for what the solution was. And this looks like a pretty good explanation, until you look closer and it says, you could also try adding an 1/8 cup of glue. And the thing is, like, this is Elmer's glue, which for most people is analogous to school glue. So the stuff you could potentially eat if, like, it wouldn't be too toxic for kids. But still, I hope nobody actually did this. But giving this presentation a couple times, using this example, I actually noticed something else in the same example that kept tricking me, that I completely read over, and it's actually one line above this. Mixing some cheese into the sauce adds moisture and helps dry it out, which can't both be true, but still, it says it here, and I've read this a lot giving this presentation and others. I've seen this a lot, and only recently I thought, oh boy, it's potentially everywhere if you don't really pay attention, and we're bad at paying attention to machine-generated content. So the question then becomes, like, why do we suffer from automation bias? Again, I've done a full hour on this. We're not going to do the whole thing again. A lot of it is social aspects and accountability problems within teams. That's boring. We can just focus on some of the stuff that is definitely true when we try to automate our work. So a lot of the reasons why we suffer from automation bias is in the relationship with task complexity and time. So if you have a job that you do and you do it in half an hour, and I tell you, yeah, tough luck, you're going to have to do it in 15 minutes, that causes stress. And stress reduces your cognitive capabilities, so you're more likely to just accept what the machine gives you, especially with generative content that looks remarkably like a human could have said that to you. It's very easy to then say, yeah, let's go. Same thing if I say, no, you can take half an hour. It's just going to be a lot more difficult because I've got 3 of these and it's a whole different subject and you're not an expert at it. Same thing. You get stressed, cognitive capabilities decline, and you're just ready to accept. I hate this example because it's a very good one, but I hate it extra because when you think about what it is that we try to automate, especially with AI, is things that take a long time and are very complex. So it feels like we're shooting ourselves in the foot here and making it actually worse with generative AI, having it do that job for you. But what do I know? One that very much stands out when it comes to generative AI is the feeling of ownership of the thing that you are making, the thing that you are doing. So there was a study in 2025 called The Brain on ChatGPT, and then a whole extra bit. Anybody heard about that study? It was, no? Made the rounds everywhere. It wasn't a very good study because the sample size was pretty low and they used some questionable methods of brain scanning, so it wasn't super well received, but there is a finding in there that I think the sample size does prove. So they had 3 groups in their study. All 3 had to write an essay. I don't know why they volunteered. I hate that, but sure, they did this. Maybe they were paid. The first group just got an offline computer and had to just type it straight from the brain to the screen. That's hardcore, no internet. Second group got access to a search engine. So they also made their essay, but using a search engine as well. The third group got access to ChatGPT. The findings are super interesting because the first group, they felt that essay was part of them. Even though they couldn't look anything up, they felt like, yeah, it may not be the best, but it's mine. And what showed is they could quote from that document without looking at it, which is cool. Like, you can quote stuff from way back when because you did something. I have a friend that we worked together on a project 10 years ago, and I know that when we meet, we will talk about this weird caching mechanism we made once, and we'll absolutely geek out about that, and then we won't speak for another 10 years. But when we do, we will talk about that caching thing because that is ours. The people of the search engine, they could quote a little bit from a document, less than the first group, and they also felt a little bit less ownership of the thing that they made. And guess what? ChatGPT group could not quote from the document that they made for the life of them, and they also felt no connection to it. And I recognize that when I write code with an agent, which I do all the time, right? I make a bunch of these tools that I'm showing you with coding agents because it's just a very easy way to get something on the screen. But if the laptop would then burn down before I committed it, doesn't really matter. Also, didn't really matter how it works because I could make 10 more of these. But that reduction in ownership makes you more vulnerable to automation bias. But there are things that we can do about it, luckily. And there's 3 things that are the most popular mitigations. It's these. But they're all wrong. Sorry for that. So human in the loop, higher system accuracy, and training are the things that people always go to when they say, we have to reduce automation bias. We can't make all of these mistakes. But they're all wrong, scientifically proven to be wrong. First of all, human in the loop makes no sense because it's the human brain that's the problem. So why would that be a solution? Yet it is something that in AI we very eagerly grab onto. Like, no, but there's human in the loop. All that does is it solves a legal loophole. It makes you the problem when OpenAI's model messes up. And that's not great. Higher system accuracy. That's one of those things like if you have a product owner that says, we sure have a lot of bugs. How about we start trying not to make bugs? Have you ever tried that? Let's do that. It sounds like a good idea. Higher system accuracy, makes for less errors, but not because you get better at making decisions. There's just less errors. Training is the one that I was really confused about. Because certainly, if you tell people how something works, they understand it, right? If I show you a manual, you will know that my software is wrong all the time. Turns out, early research showed, oh, no, it's definitely working. Later research shows it's not doing anything, and then the most up-to-date research says it's actually making it worse. Because turns out, when you explain stuff to people, they become confident. And when we become confident, we make a bunch of errors thinking that we know how this works. So that actually doesn't help at all. There's one study even that showed that if you explain to a group of people what automation bias is, that they get worse with their automation bias. Hello, welcome. Welcome to this talk. But there are things that you can do about it. So there are things that we can do about it. One of the things is that metrics matter. So if I give you a piece of software that I built, and you ask it a question, and it gives you an answer, if it says this is 20% likely to be wrong, in a big font, nice red letters, maybe an emoji, if we're feeling fancy, you will pay attention. It will spark that critical thinking that you need to really look at, okay, what am I doing here? So of course, every model vendor, every software creator is doing this. You would think, because they have access to the same research, but they don't. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info is not a metric. They will never show you a metric of how wrong they will be. But it's funny, there is a piece of research that shows the top 3 legal software programs. So for the US law, if you look something up, it's supposed to give you all the right answers. They hallucinate, I've got a quote from head, 11 to 23% of the time. Now that you have that metric, you might be a little bit more careful with it, because I think that ChatGPT won't be much more different. So Copilot, GitHub Copilot, of course, they have metrics. Review output carefully before use. That's like teachers telling me to do homework. They couldn't make me do homework. GitHub is not going to make me do homework. So Microsoft, of course, with all their talented people, they will do better. Nope. Actually, nobody's doing this. It is a little difficult, because normal machine learning models, most normal machine learning models, like object detection, will say, I'm 88% sure that that is a human. And you can use that metric to say there's 12% chance that we're wrong. Maybe review this. Inferencing on large language models doesn't give us that. It doesn't tell us how accurate or grounded that one response is. But we do have that on the model card and on the benchmark, so it is possible. These people could be doing that. But I think they're not really incentivized to do that. I think their incentive is to make you burn as many tokens as possible, because there's a bit of an economic problem going on around the AI cycle. But that's not the topic of this talk. I don't want to get that ranty. Research also shows that in order to help us do better engaging the output of machines, we should start offering information in our software rather than recommendation. I'm going to explain this one, because most of these chatbots that we're building, if you ask it a question, it goes and does some tool calls. One of the tool calls could be a search engine. It gets all kinds of results. And then usually it's going to say, well, based on these results, this is the stuff that you should be considering. That is a recommendation, and that is dangerous. If you ask that same question, and it would find those documents and tell you, here are the documents I found, look at them. That triggers that critical thinking. Even if it asks, how do you want to proceed? That would be better than trying to figure out what's in these documents and how can I give you a recommendation. Especially if that decision has to be taken under some duress, complexity, or time, it's better to offer information than recommendation. And then there's one that is a pretty easy one, 4 eyes principle. If you make something with any kind of automation, you would benefit from a second pair of eyes looking at it. Except there is a condition for this. If you make something, generative AI, code, whether it's text, code, or images, if you send a pull request or a review request by any means to somebody you don't know, or like a review board, you do way less work to make sure that's correct. If you send that same work to a peer, somebody in your team you like or don't like, doesn't matter, they're in your team, they know you personally, you're going to do more work. This triggers something in your brain that makes you work harder to make sure that that work is correct. So that's an interesting way of looking at a pull request. Who are you sending this to? It's also an interesting thing when you are sending a LinkedIn message to millions of people, if you don't know them, yeah, what's the damage? And that's actually one of the things I think is part of this AI slop that we're seeing. We're just sending stuff into the void. I don't know those people. That's fine. But don't send them in an email to me, so I maybe should be talking to my colleagues about this. So we've talked a little bit about authenticity, and we talked a little bit about reviewing, but combining the two can be difficult. But I did build some stuff for that. So one of the things that I built was in that same abstract generator. Let me get up my demo notes. So one of the things I do, here's the pull request, is I don't just make a file and then say, here's the pull request, good luck, because that doesn't help, right? You're still suffering from the same automation bias. One of the things I do is I do a content check, or what I should right now really be calling an intent check. Because I think, well, that's an aggressive zoom. I think LLMs are really good at reading and summarizing and explaining, maybe condensing that content, intent a little bit, but they're very bad at writing, or worse at writing. So what I do is I have a second prompt that asks for every question and answer in that issue, tell me where it is in the abstract, or tell me that it isn't there. It's also fine. I'm not asking it, if it's not there, rewrite it, or tell me how I could put that in there. And I have to be aggressive in my prompt because it will find ways to go, oh, you should do this, you should do that. No recommendations, just information. And yes, those are emojis, but I asked specifically for emojis. But from that point on, that's the last time we'll see LLMs in this program, because now we're actually going to do some really good coding engineering work. So I showed you screenshots of the video from Dylan. It basically works the same way as this. Who has ever heard of lemmatization? Whoa, that's way more people than I thought. So lemmatization, and you as well. That was a late finger up. Did you read it and then go, hey, I know this? That's good. So lemmatization is changing a word into its base form. It's something we've been doing a long time. It's something that also makes search engines work the way they work. This is a part of natural language processing, which is basically a solved problem, or at least this is. So if you want to see this list of 10 words that Dylan showed, is that in the abstract? You got to think about capital letters. How is this verb being used? Was it broken off with a hyphen to the next sentence? There's a bunch of stuff you have to do. But you can also just take every word and turn it into a lemma. So I have this notebook here. There's a really good package for this called Spacey. Also works on in C# if you fancy that. And all you have to do, so I made a really bad abstract. Click. All you have to do is this. You say, given this text, NLP it. I think that's the best library I've ever seen. Like, how do you use this? Well, just NLP it. Okay. The natural language processing library just says NLP it. The only thing you then have to do is find all the unique lemmas. So for every, it will give you the lemmas in the document, and you just say, give me only the unique ones. And you will see here that it's been doing that. Something like deployments becomes deployment. Enhancing becomes enhance, delving becomes delve, and now it's really trivial to figure out what words are in here that I don't want to have in there. Because these are those triggers for me that tell me that's not authentic, or at least that was made by an LLM without caring too much what's in there. So I could just say, find the offenders, which is just a string comparison. Oh, I apparently didn't click one of the cells. Haha. So actually, this abstract has every bad thing in there. So this is a good way of showing what not to do. So it just tells me what's in there. This is super trivial to put into a Python script. I won't have to show you that, but that's how we get this. So in my abstract generator, it says, hey, you've got this stuff in there. This text, not generated by an LLM. I typed that on my keyboard and then pasted in the offending words. Way easier than to ask an LLM to do this. I have had a version of this where I ask an LLM, is one of these 10 words in there? And it would start making up new words that it triggered on by itself. So it would figure out, oh, also don't use this word. I'm like, didn't ask you to do that, please stop. So this is a deterministic way of doing that, and that really helps. It also checks for M-dashes, but most importantly, it has that big warning. I don't think I could make it red. I could try. So this is the warning that says, hey, this model has these characteristics, and you can read more here. It's still, every time I see this, puts a smile on my face, and then I do try to review to my heart's content. But the most important thing after this is if you find stuff, you just edit them yourself. So this is part of what I think makes it authentic. Those words that are in there that I don't want, I go in and change them for stuff that I would say. If I see some, it makes me look really closely at this abstract, so I'm going to go in and make changes myself. And then I could have this peer-reviewed, but I have too many ideas and not enough friends to review them, so I've been reviewing my own stuff. So take that with a grain of salt. So that's one very simple way of doing this for abstracts, but again, you might not have 13,000 examples of the thing you're making, right? If you are working at an e-commerce company and you're trying to make something for product descriptions, you may not have historical data over the years of your product descriptions. But there's stuff that you can do, right? Like I've somehow found stuff that was useful in my inbox. You might scrape your competitors' websites. I didn't say that out loud, but you could. You can find a Wayback Machine. You can find different versions of product descriptions over different websites and build that data set. Or work your dev magic, right? Like make a tool for this. This is exactly what I ended up doing with a tool that I call Slop Slurp. I'll show you Slop Slurp. Slop Slurp is my favorite tool right now. Also, you will have a QR code for this. I haven't hosted it anywhere because it uses tokens to do stuff, and those are my tokens, not yours. But I can open this up, and it'll show you a really lovely little bright thing that says, oh, let's see how it reads. I had one version of this, it was dark mode, black and red, and it would say, I will find violations. And nobody wanted to use this, so I reworded everything to be much cuter. And now, actually, I'm getting some use out of this. So let me paste in now 2 paragraphs of the world's worst abstract. And there's 2 things that are happening. One is using just deterministic logic to find M-dashes, to find Unicode stuff that shouldn't be in there. But it's also running the 33 checks, unsurprisingly, from that tropes directory. Right? What I did, I give full credit to the guy, by the way, who made that. But what I did is I told my agent, look at these tropes, turn them into sort of code analysis rules that I've really wanted to have for a long time. So all of this is just the different tropes that I gave a sort of an identifier that I could use. And it's running those against an LLM and finding, oh, grandiose stakes inflation, which is definitely true for that very bad abstract. It will do highlighting, it will tell you what to do, but it's not saying you did this wrong. It's more of a, ooh, I'm going to say recommendation. I shouldn't do that. It's more information that you could turn into, like this thing still needs a bit of work, but I'm hoping that people will use this because the people I've talked to, marketing departments, they've said, no, we're not going to do that because that's extra work. And they started using LLMs to have less work on their hands. So I'm hoping you will have more luck with this, but I think this is a nice tool. Just when you made something, run it through here. See if it matches one of those tropes. You might get lucky. So, writing drunk, like I'm a big fan of this. Just putting what is in my mind on paper. I have a bunch of session IDs, and this tool I made allows me to put that intent in there and then have something generated that I can then edit sober. It is about that intent. What is it that you want to say? I hope that if you're one of the people who likes writing emails with LLMs, you will think about, like, what is it I'm trying to say next time, instead of just like answer yes and then have it write a page of prose that will read like AI Slop. Talk to experts about what it is that is good content, right? If you're making something for product descriptions, you probably have people that are product managers that you could talk to because they will have an opinion and they will be glad if you turn that into something useful. Because we can't keep just using ChatGPT and Copilot to build stuff for us that feels unauthentic, like not for your company and not for yourself. So editing sober means that you rewrite stuff. You don't let an LLM do that. You don't let it make recommendations. You take its information and you rewrite stuff. Makes you a better writer as well, makes everything come off way more authentic. But all of the stuff that I've built, they are basically triggers to say, hey, remember? You were on stage talking about this. You should review this carefully because people are watching. After the first 2 presentations I've given on this topic, people have started sending me screenshots of my company and of my blog posts where I did stuff like that in the past. I'm like, oh, maybe I should really... That probably is the best way to get rid of your automation bias. Have other people watch over your shoulder. I'm a big believer that anything that you can build in code is going to be better than what you do with an LLM, right? LLMs don't have a monopoly on putting language in your application. You just saw me use natural language processing, which is as good as deterministic. It is a machine learning application, but I can be sure that every time I run that text through that model, it'll be the same result. So use more determinism. It'll be more better. And this one is scary, but I put it in anyway. But talk to each other. So I told you, like I saw my company make worse and worse LinkedIn posts. So I said, hey, I don't know how to bring this, but can we talk about that? If you have people around you, if somebody sends you an email and you're like, oh, that didn't really feel good, talk to them, and maybe you can help them because you can do stuff with code that those people probably can't do. You're still developers, and there's so much to offer while this technology is trying to steal your job. While I was making all these slides, I eventually looked back at hours of work and tools I built, and I thought, why does this even matter? Because on the one hand, I could say, let me just do a writing course and get better at making abstracts. On the other hand, you could say, everybody's using this with LLMs, join the AI Slop. But I'll use the word pissed. I'm generally pissed off at how these people keep telling us this is possible and that they have billions of dollars throwing this at us, saying, use this, replace yourself. So my biggest joy these days comes from being in a place like this, talking to people like you and saying, please join the fight, battling AI Slop, because I think you are the perfect audience to actually make a difference and actually use LLMs, but in a way that feels authentic still, that doesn't make it all slide downhill. I think that we can actually make a big dent in this, even if we will not get rid of the LLMs, because those billions of dollars, I don't seem to have them lying around, but you can make a difference. I'm a firm believer that if generative AI is going to be of quality, human effort has to be made in one of the surrounding steps. That could be tooling for generating stuff, reviewing stuff, both. It could be things like what we're doing here together, but something has to change. And I'm a firm believer that we can do this with generative AI if we all pay a little bit more attention. If that sounded too preachy, don't reach out to me. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. This will take you to Slop Slurp. You can run that yourself. I'm super happy that you were all here. If you have questions, please come forward so that the rest can just escape. But thanks, everybody, and enjoy the last session of the day. Cheers.